Is that unusual, Martin, to hear?
From a player, yeah. From a manager, maybe not. But maybe Fernandes has been given that license to be a role model, somebody that sort of pushes on the kids, shows them the way to behave, maybe personally take an involvement in that young player. But it's very open. I don't know if it really needs to be said, but we all know that now. So we'll all be looking out to see if his attitude remains the same as it is. Sometimes it can be about attitude.
I quite like that, don't you, Simon? I mean, Bruno, obviously one of the senior players, thinks it should have been said, and he said it.
Yeah, it's a strange one, but ultimately it must reflect upon the fact that there was a challenge with this young man's attitude, and there's obviously been this discussion repeatedly about the younger players. Ronaldo talked about the culture of the younger players inside this football club not being prepared to listen to the senior pros in the way that he was, and of course his behaviour's been less than exemplary over the period of time, but notwithstanding that, the point was made. So clearly they feel the necessity. I think it's basically saying he's arrived at a point where he understands the errors of his ways, and I think if he was still perpetuating those errors of his ways, it would be a different dynamic. But the fact he's saying, look, this is a kid that's come through a scenario of not really getting what's expected of him, and now he does. I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether it's his job or his place. If the manager's happy for him to do it, then I guess who are we to suggest that it's not appropriate?
Well, I think it's leadership, isn't it? And he's showing that, yeah, sure, if it's in my mind to say it, I'll say it because I feel I can say it.
I suppose if you were saying it about a senior pro, you'd have real challenges. But if you're saying it against a young player, it's about the culture of the dressing room. A lot is made of that, and they have to be together as a unit. And if that's a way to get them together as a unit, I think it's a strange way to do it. I think that's the sort of conversation you have with a young man in private, and you have it amongst yourselves. You don't necessarily have to air it to the media because it gives it a different tarnish, and like everyone's just said, people will now look at this boy with a set of eyes that perhaps he could be a problem for the future. I'm not sure it's helpful, but I imagine Ten Hag, if he thinks it's okay.
I think Fernandes needs to be right on his game as well now.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, it's just thinking back to the real characters of the Roy Keanes, we might have heard that sort of thing being said. And he was well able to say it because of what he'd won at the club. But Fernandes is saying it without having won a great deal there.
Well, there's Mully the Mank is saying Jim Simon Bruno needs to get back in his box and start putting in performances rather than worrying about other players who are doing better than him. One guy who did do well last night, Martin, Kieran Tierney, was something of a slight redemption night for Kieran last night.
I think it's been really difficult for him because if you have to look at what he's been through, Zinchenko came in, was quite magnificent. Tomiyasu then went in front of him, also played really well. So there was a lot on him last night, and he was the standout player, Jim. And I think he showed a lot of resolve, a lot of character. You know, when you're not being picked to play, you're watching other people play, you question yourself, and it seemed like he was looking to make a point last night. But it does show the strength in depth that Arsenal now possess.
Yeah, he'd fallen down the pecking order a bit, and he had been injured, hadn't he? But he's now back.
Well, he's played. I think before last night, he played 10 of the 11 matches. He had minutes, shall we say? Only 3 starts within that. But I think he showed last night that he's more than capable. And Tomiyasu did come on and then went off. So there's a real injury because he's been outstanding as well in that left-back role. So you can't question any of these decisions, but it's tough on Kieran Tierney. But now it looks like he's going to get an opportunity at the weekend.
And I think Arsenal look at the January transfer window, or Arteta does, as something of an opportunity, Simon. With the position that we're in right now, it demands another level of player. That player has to be available. We'll look at everything and let's see what we can do. Now that's exciting. If you're an Arsenal fan, you're thinking, yeah, we're up there jousting with the best.
I think it's also about maintaining the position that they're in. I mean, obviously they're now in the mindset of their top 4 side again, and they're going to be in the top 4, and they're going to be rebuilding the principle of what Arsene Wenger regularly achieved, which is Champions League qualification. So with that in mind, I don't think it's him saying, look, we are the runners and riders now for the Premier League title. I think it's him saying, in order to maintain where we are and not regress, we're going to need to have a little bit more depth, perhaps.
Another level of player. What does that mean, Martin? I mean, honestly, when Arsenal fans hear that, must be thinking, wow, well, what can we expect? Who are the targets?
Arteta remains really incredibly focused right now. You can see that. Nothing else on his mind but to get these games done before the World Cup. And if he wants to maintain the standards he's got, I think the board will back him, the owners will back him, because he's shown now the fruits of his work. It's been a process that they've been all bought into, and if he needs the players, I think they'll back him up. It's going to be very interesting. This is a really tough weekend, actually, Jim, to see how Arsenal get on against Chelsea, because the away.
What does another level mean, by the way? What does that mean to the players that he signed already? What does that mean to the dressing room when he says another level?
Well, can the players that are there maintain this level and go to the next level? The next level is to be champions.
Sure.
So that has to be what the
If
aspiration.
you read in between that, you're basically saying that that's why you're reading into the idea that he's thinking about winning the title, because he's suggesting that the players that are in there have gotten to a certain point, but another level of player is required to go to the next point.
I thought that worked, Jim. Watching the story at Arsenal, so Zinchenko being injured and Jesus at the start, they were fantastic, leading the way. But I do feel now, where the two youngsters, Martinelli and Saka, were almost carrying the club last year, they're now leading the club now again.
Well,
in their performances.
Chelsea Arsenal, you mentioned it, Martin. It's Sunday. It's a talkSPORT exclusive. Looking forward to that. 2:00 is it, Luke? 12 o'clock for that one. Chelsea against Arsenal. A talkSPORT exclusive. Certainly exciting times. If you look at what Arteta's saying, another level of player. Wow, January, the window. Who do you fancy, Arsenal fans? 8:10:89. Friday morning, Jim and Simon live with Martin Keown.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.